we've talked some during the last couple of days about hiring, clearly. And I think what a good conclusion to all of this, and I hope you're still awake for the last session here. We have two very, very good ADs here who have hired lots of coaches, have strong thoughts about that. Gerald Harrison from Austin Peay and Mark Benson at Albany. I'd like to, for each of you, Gerald and Mark, to introduce yourselves, talk about a little background for the team here, and then maybe some introduction about how you approach a head coaching position hire.
Appreciate having me on, Jeff. I'll give a little bit of background. At University at Albany, I've been here for 7 years, this coming August 19th. I remember that day because it's the day I was offered this job. It's also my wife's birthday, so it's tough to forget that one. And in this time here, I've hired 7 head coaches in the 6.5 years, two women's basketball coaches. One was so good, she's now the head coach at Boston College, so she made me look pretty smart. Others are current coach. 2 women's soccer coaches. One is so good, he's the head coach at Temple, made me look smart. A women's volleyball coach, women's lacrosse, and just most recently a men's basketball head coach here. Prior to University of Albany, I was at Old Dominion University for about 20 years. Loved it, lived at the beach. Started in marketing promotions for a few years and moved on to Coca-Cola for a brief stint where I did pouring rights negotiations on the Eastern Seaboard from Delaware to North Carolina. Really missed college athletics. I knew 6 months in I'd maybe made not a mistake, but just not where I'm supposed to be. But I promised 2 years to the people that hired me, so I stayed. Didn't have any plans to come back to ODU, but I did in the development role, and thought I'd be there for 3 or 4 years and maybe move on. And I just was very fortunate that big projects were put in front of us. I was able to, take a leadership position in, from building a basketball arena to starting a football program to transitioning from FCS to FBS. So really great run. I love the people I work with. Love the place I worked. We were constantly moving. Wood Seelick, who you heard from earlier, a good friend, was really instrumental in me getting ready and being prepared to be an athletic director, and really appreciative of him. And of course, Doc has always been a good mentor, but Wood really helped put me in the right places. He let me chair our men's basketball search before I left, where we hired Jeff Jones, who's still the coach there. Allowed me to sit in on his one-on-one meetings with the president once a month, and not just to talk about development, to talk about everything. So very, very appreciative and grateful. And it's been a good run here at U Albany. And before we get into more search detail, I don't know, Gerald, are we back on? We can hear a little bit. He's got a better story and more exciting than mine. Are we back online, Gerald?
I think I see Gerald.
You're good.
All right, great. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. Excited to be here. My name is Gerald Harrison, Director of Athletics at Austin Peay State University, located in Clarksville, Tennessee. I've been here since August of 2018, and been very excited about some of the things that we've been able to accomplish and get done in that short time. Prior to Austin Peay, I was at Duke University working for Kevin White for 10 years as a senior associate AD for internal affairs, which basically I had oversaw HR, our equipment, all our student support groups, academics, equipment, athletic medicine, sports performance, and those things, along with had sport oversight of football and the sport of fencing. During that time, surprisingly enough, I was the chairman of the NCAA fencing committee, probably because of my great athleticism and how good I looked in those white outfits. And I did that, and prior to that, I was at the University of Tennessee, where I worked for Philip Fulmer and on the football staff, doing the good days. And I was in charge of recruiting, in charge of football recruiting there. And that's also where I went to school, the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. When it comes to coaching searches, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, we've done several in a short period of time. A couple football searches, men's basketball recently and women's basketball, along with softball, track, I think I missed it. I think in women's golf have been the searches that we've done since I've been AD here. When I was at Duke, I was fortunate to be a part of several of those searches. Dr. White is very big into making sure that people are involved with the process. And so I was also involved and learned a lot from the Godfather doing that search time. So my philosophy is pretty simple. We have what we call here the total gov concept, where we believe in building the total student athlete. And I'm not really looking for a coach that's great in X's and O's only. I focus on wanting to hire new CEO, the CEO types. I believe that in today's college athletics, you can't just be a person that hides in a room and watch film and knows all the everything done in the old network. You got to be able to communicate with our student, communicate well with our student athletes, communicate well with all of our constituencies. You can't shy away from that. You got to believe that there's more to it. You got to understand the role of mental health involved in dealing with our student athletes. You just, and basically you just got to understand there's more than just whatever you do on the court and between the lines or what have you. So that's the number one thing we go through and I think about when trying to hire a search. I don't want a coach as much as I want a CEO for a new era in college athletics.
Gerald, thank you. And since this is titled A to Z, maybe we start with the A here. And I think most of you here, certainly those of the two panelists who are ADs and former AD here, talk about, if you would, both Gerald and Mark, about your idea of keeping a list in your pocket at all times, just in case, whether you've got a coach that has been so successful that he or she might be leaving you, or on the other end of that spectrum, has not done the job in a way that you wish to be done. So how do you prepare yourself for that day with that list, and who do you involve around you to help you with that? Maybe you'd first, Gerald.
Well, I think as far as the list, I do believe you have to have one. You have to have folks that you're thinking about, but I think that it's not a static document that sits in a desk. I think what I do is every year I look at all of my lists and try to add or subtract people based on what's been going on around me and collecting names. I use I believe in networks and using the people that you know and just ask them about random people. I evaluate coaches as we go along. You may hear a lot about somebody's talking about a great assistant coach at a peer institution, and you write that name down. See if that person's interested. I look at who's doing what in recruiting. But the list, I guess the best part about it is the list is not static. You have to be prepared to move it. I think the people that I always thought I was going to hire, you have that list. Hey, when I get an AD, I'm going to look at hiring these people. But at the end of the day, once you sit in that seat and you start looking about it and thinking about it, that list moves. And you got to be prepared to adjust that list around. I think when we did our football search, the 4 people that I always had on my list didn't even, when it really came down to it and I really vetted what we needed, didn't make it. And so you just got to be prepared to continue to always move that list around, names up and down that chart.
Mark?
Yeah, I would agree. Very similar. I think it is important that you have a list, and it's definitely not static. And I do similar things as Gerald illustrated. Usually, sometimes during a basketball or football season, particularly, I might just go through pull out the list that I have and look at who is still on it, where they are, kind of refresh my memory on the type of person they are, type of job they have, where they've been. Talk to colleagues around that I trust and know to pick up names that aren't on my list that should be on my radar. And it's not just me. We have a couple people on our staff, like our associate AD for business. He's a great researcher, and so we'll get together and we'll talk about. The good thing is we know the culture that we have in our department, so we already know the type of person that we want to hire, whether it's an administrator, coach, soccer, baseball, football, compliance. whatever that's, because I think we do have a strong culture. And similar to Gerald, obviously we want somebody who's, good at recruiting, good at strategies, is gonna work to win, but we want somebody who's gonna be a really good fit within our department, and be a partner. And, at a school like Albany, where resources aren't as robust as they are in some other places, we need to find ways to grow together, and find ways to continue to improve from year to year. So I always like people that have been at different levels of college athletics throughout their career. I feel like that type of experience will lend itself well to a place like at UAlbany, where you have to fight for some resources, and you're constantly working to do that. But more than anything, I think it's about the leadership of a program, the type of person that you are. I have 4 kids, so I always try to operate with our student athletes' best interests in mind, and be able to go home every night and look my kids in the eye, put my head down on the pillow, and rest easy. So it's a constant process. I used to work with Jenna Verga, I don't know if she's on here, Old Dominion, and coming up through development, I'm always building relationships with people, whether it's donors, prospective donors, colleagues across the country. And whenever we go places, she would always joke me like, hey, you were kind of interviewing that person, weren't you? I said, well, I don't know if it's an interview, but I'm trying to get to know them and see what they're about. And if it's somebody that's bright and somebody that's energetic and somebody that's positive, I try to file it away in the back of my mind, because you never know.
So the second part of the question, who do each of you involve in your searches, both internally and externally? Have you used search firms on the external side? And then who are your trusted confidants on the internal side when you're looking for a head coach? Maybe start with you this time, Mark.
Sure. So internally, if there is an opening, it starts with my boss, our president, and we meet regularly throughout the year, just to say, hey, make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what we're looking for. Make sure we're on the same page in terms of what the process will look like, even though we might have just done a search 6 months ago or 8 months ago for a different type position. It's just important to keep that communication and be on the same page. We'll often work with our senior women's administrator, our deputy athletic director, and our associate AD as a core group, because they bring to the table different skill sets that are important. I mentioned the research capabilities of our associate AD. And then depending on the search, we build from there. Externally, I've been very fortunate. Doc's let me be a part of TopConnect, and then relative to my most recent search in men's basketball, being part of this group, the basketball side of TopConnect over the last 3 years, really helped prepare me and us to do this search, because of, like many of you all, with COVID, we're at a big financial pinch here. And so I have worked with search firms and enjoy working with search firms, but we're in a situation at this point where we just could not do that. There was too many other areas where we felt like if we had money to invest, it would have to go in a different search. But TopConnect really positioned us very well. I think of the final 6 candidates, maybe 4 of them came through relationships that over the years through TopConnect, and we hired Dwayne Killings, DK, and he's somebody I met 3 years ago through TopConnect. Outside of that, it's trusted colleagues. Wood Seelig, who I mentioned, Doc Sanders, who I mentioned. I called Gerald. We talked a couple times this year I just wanted to hear about his searches and his process, and constantly learning on what you do. And then I probably have a handful of about 5 or 6 others that I know I can talk to about anything. I know it's not going to go anywhere. I know they'll shoot me straight if I'm off the page and reel me back in. So I think you just have to have that trusted network of people that you respect their opinion, you trust their confidentiality, and go from there.
Gerald, you're internal and external?
Hey, Jeff, while he's figuring this out, can I share just a quick story with you?
Please.
So a few years ago, we were hiring our women's basketball coach, Katie Abramson. Terrific job here. I knew it was a matter of time, so we were constantly reviewing folks. Was headed to the Final Four. She had given me a call, that some things were brewing, and I get down there, and she called me and said, "Hey, I'm taking the job at Central Florida. So what I thought was gonna be a nice, relaxing Final Four trip turned into search mode pretty quickly. But as I said, I had a list prepared, working with my folks here in the event. And I invited Dick Sander and Wood Seelig, and actually a former donor, a board member from Old Dominion. We went to lunch one day, and I just pulled out my laptop, and we sat there for about 4 hours, just literally going through names. They kicked names to me. I shared names with them that we were at. And after that 3 or 4 hour period, I went from feeling like, I need to get back home to very, very prepared and excited. Because doing a search it's fun, it's exciting, it's 24/7, but it's a good process. So it was just kind of funny how here we are thinking we're gonna have maybe a beer and some oysters, and all of a sudden it turned into a 4 hour work session. And we had great search. We had Joanna McNamee, who's now the head coach of Boston College.
Hey,
I
Jeff.
think Gerald's back.
Jeff, let me share a little story. This is kind of, I think, talks a little bit about, just an interesting situation. This year at ETSU, we had to hire a women's basketball coach. And so it just so happened that our men's team was playing. We played somebody, and one of the assistant coaches had people over to his house after the game, Greg Heyer. And so I had a couple beers, and I was talking to, Greg Heyer's wife. And we were just talking. He said, well, if you ever need to hire a women's basketball coach, I got just the right guy. And I said, oh, really? Who's that? She tells me this guy, Simon Harris. And I say, okay, great. So I kind of put it in the back of my mind, and we're going through the search, and I called Debbie Antonelli, who probably is a inner circle women's basketball, maybe knows more about, the women's basketball world than anybody. So I'm talking to Debbie about 2 or 3 people. And I just happened to say to her, hey, do you know this guy, Simon Harris? And she kind of laughed. She said, I've known Simon Harris since he was 8 years old. And I said, really? And I said, well, tell me about him. She said, oh, he's a great recruiter. He's an offensive genius. And she just raved about him. And so, I say to her, well, if you were going to hire, any of these people we talked about, what do you think? And she says, well, I'm a strong advocate for hiring women to be a women's basketball coach. I know. She said, that's a no-brainer. I'd hire Simon Harris. So I just kind of laughed, kept that in the back of my mind. And just so happens that night, I was talking to Anthony Grant being the men's coach at Dayton. And we were talking, and I said to him, do you know Simon Harris? Because Simon had been an assistant once upon a time in Dayton's women's program, and actually in their men's program too. So I say to Anthony, do you know him? And I say, oh yeah, and he raves about him. And so it was just the most unusual set of circumstances that tied everything together. So you never know where you're going to get, really important information. So we went ahead after we got to interview Simon and a bunch of other folks, made the decision he was the guy. So just what I'm saying, don't take anybody that anybody says, kind of keep it in your memory bank.
Well, and I'll add something to this conversation. Obviously, we do searches as a firm, and we have a regular meeting of our consultants especially when we're in a particular season. So if it's football season, basketball season, spring sports seasons, we will spend an hour once a week to go through what we think are the best candidates out there. Now, we'll kick it around, and some of those candidates would be good fits at some places and not others. But I think we really do maintain as a search firm an ongoing list in almost every sport. Now, there's not a lot of hiring going on of firms in sports other than football and basketball, but it does happen. And when it does happen, we did the search for University of Texas softball and University of Texas track and field. So we do get hired to do that every once in a while. And when they ask us, are you ready to do it? We better be ready. So we have that constant meeting where we discuss good candidates to be good head coaches on a regular basis.
Hey, Jeff, if I could add something while we're waiting for Gerald, in terms of a list, and I keep this list constant categories regardless of the sport. They usually break it down, current head coaches that you're interested in, associate and assistant head coaches that you're interested in, former head coaches that are back as an assistant or associate that you're interested in. And then I have a stretch category, right? Somebody that if the University at Albany hired Anthony Grant, you just mentioned about how in the world did they pull that off? And that's sometimes like doing your research and knowing what situation somebody's in. It could be they have family in the area and they would like to get back home because they have parents that are elderly and want to get close. It could be they have a new president or new AD. It's a situation where they would be open to a move maybe when they wouldn't have normally. So just something that would people go, man, how in the world did that happen? And in our most recent search, we had one or two people like that we didn't go in that direction, but we had conversations.
I see you, Gerald. Are you back with us? Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Apparently, it would be my day to let everybody go to lunch as a staff, and then my computer fails, so it's my fault. As for the internal and external, internally, I have my deputy AD and our senior women's administrator is definitely involved, has been really a true confidant in this, and our external, my chief of staff, not external, our chief of staff, and then our senior associate for external. That's pretty much my team when we go start these processes. I don't involve a whole lot of people internally. That's not including the president. That's first. I don't even, Dr. Licaria and before that, Dr. White are in the middle of everything, but that's our team here. When I'm ready to load up the car and drive to meet some coach somewhere or fly somewhere, they're usually with me for a lot of those conversations. Externally, I have used search firms and have good relationships with those, just like Mark mentioned. I think they can be very valuable at times to help us out. But generally, if you're not going to use a search firm, it is just those casual conversations that you talked about over time where you prepared your list. But I'll call Dr. White at Duke and get Stan Wilcox. People that I've worked with that know me and know me really well, so they just don't give me names of random people. So I think when you go externally, sometimes people just like give you the names of the top 10 coaches that they ever heard about. I like to talk to people who understand me and how I operate, and they'll say, "Man, this is a good person for you. You need to consider that person." And that's kind of how that goes. I mean, I just went through that with our men's basketball coaches search, and after we've learned that our coach was going to leave to take a job, I called Coach K and said, "Hey, I just need names, some people that that are quality folks." And he said, "Well, Nate James." And I said, "Well," to my stretches, I was like, "Nate James is not coming. I can't get Nate James." He goes, "I think Nate wants to be a head coach. You can get Nate James." And I had a call, and legitimately we had it done in like 3 or 4 days. But I would have never done that without being able to reach out to somebody that knew me and also knew the type of person that I wanted to be a part of a program. So that's the kind of the external part of it. I will say this. I'm going to say this one thing before. One thing I don't do, and some people do it. I don't involve donors directly involved with the search process. I think I keep them abreast of what's going on. I may talk to them, but as far as bringing your top donor to go see I have not done that. And that could be that I'm at Austin Peay and we don't have a donor that pays enough money that I would consider it. But if we, I'm not Mark. I don't have those big time guys. But if we, but I just always feel like that can really cloud your judgment and not let you do exactly what you feel is best for your athletics department.
And I think that's a good segue to a question. Who do you involve in your searches from? And I think of two ends of that spectrum. One is the donor, the big donor, one who is very interested and gives you a lot of money. The other is student athletes. And do you involve student athletes in your search process? And Doc, you probably have some thoughts there too. Mark?
Yeah, sure. Well, relative to student athletes, I've not involved them directly in the search in terms of the interview process, but absolutely one of the very first steps when you have a transition. So most recently in men's basketball, we went in and talked to the team as a group and said we're both going in a different direction. Waited 2 days, and then I scheduled individual meetings, 30-minute meetings with every single member of our men's basketball team, one-on-one with myself and our deputy athletic director, if he could be there, just to kind of debrief, just to check in, how are you feeling, right? It's okay if you're upset. It's okay if you're feeling nervous in this transition. You might just tell me how you're feeling. And then we talked about what are you looking for in your next leader? What type of person from basketball, style of play, off the court type of person. And it was a very, very good process to go through, because it after those conversations, we knew we were all on the same page. So after that, usually appoint 1 or 2 members, as they could be sort of the liaison for the team if they want to have any conversations about where we are in the process. Not necessarily about who are we talking to, but where are we? Are we talking to the type of people that we mutually agree that we want to, as a check-in. In terms of the donor, I've done it more often than not. There hasn't been any donor participation outside of the same kind of conversations. Hey, what are you looking for in next leader? I talked to a lot of our former men's basketball players by decades that were influential, just to check in and hear from them what they how are they feeling about our program, how they saw it. This most recent search, I did include 4 of our donors. We happen to be, Gerald, none of them are as big as you're thinking either, by the way. I wish they were. And if you have somebody, send them my way. But we're getting ready to do a major renovation of our arena. And in our case, our previous coach has been there for 20 years. So basically all anyone knew in Division I history was this one voice, this one person. So I felt like it was very important to allow them to see the type of other candidates, people that are out there, right? This big world out there. There's lots of good coaches. And I purposely picked people that I know very well, who know me very well. It's not just a donor relationship. I spend time outside of work with them, and I know they wouldn't try to influence the process in any way. And so it just happened to work, because Gerald's right. It can not go in a good direction if you get the wrong person involved, or just you never know. So outside of that, it was our deputy AD, our senior women's administrator, our associate AD for business was the core group. We had president met with the 2 finalists that we had, the donors with the 2 finalists. And then interestingly enough, it was all through Zoom. We never met one person in person, which was really, really weird. But because we were so prepared and done so much homework, it wasn't really a problem.
Gerald, how about you on the student athlete side?
Well, from a student athlete standpoint, it's just like Mark said. I did the same thing. Once we make a decision, we inform the student athletes, give them a cool down period, then engage them in the conversation of what are you looking for? What's important to you? What were we lacking? Sometimes you have to do an evaluation. We had a situation with one of our student athletes were not disappointed when one of our coaches left, and they told that story, and I got to talk to them on a one-on-one basis and what was wrong. So we knew the type of mentality we needed to bring in. We communicate with them regularly, whether it's Teamworks or even if it's a phone call of, hey, here's where we are. We're down to a few. We'll have something done in a little while, just to communicate with them, make them feel a part of the process. But as far as them sitting down questioning coaches, I've chosen, we haven't done that at this point.
Doc, any thoughts there?
Yeah, sure. Let me tell this story. When I was at VCU, I'd hired Jeff Capel when he was 27 years old. I'd be there for a while. He was so successful that in 4 years, people started pursuing him. And so Jeff calls me. It was like a Wednesday afternoon. He said, hey, a search firm called me and they want me to interview for the Oklahoma job. I thought, oh, Jeff, that's great. And he said, what they're going to do, they're going to bring 5 candidates to Atlanta to interview. And then They'll do that Thursday and Friday, and on Sunday they're bringing 2 back, and then they'll make a decision. I said, great. And he said, but Doc, you got to do one favor for me. And I said, what's that? He said, the search firm has told us that if the name gets out of any of the candidates, they will be immediately eliminated from any possibility of getting the job. So nobody, you can't tell anybody. And I said, Jeff, well, I need to tell the president. And Jeff says to me, he said, Doc, you can't tell the president. You know how he is. He'll go to the Commonwealth Club and he'll start he loves that kind of attention. He'll be talking, say, well, Coach Capel, he's so good, that everybody wants him. He's being interviewed. He said, you can't tell him. So now I'm going, oh my goodness, this is not a good situation because I can't win in this deal. So should I tell the president? Should I not? So I decide not to tell the president. So to make a long story short, they interview the 5 guys, and then they bring 2 back, Jeff and another guy. And then Joe Castiglione calls me on Sunday, and he's saying, yeah, Jeff did a great interview. He's really young. He's going to be a great coach. I'm just not sure about him. And I'm going, oh, okay, well, this sounds pretty good. And then Monday rolls around, and Jeff's in Atlanta. He calls me and says, hey, interview went good, but I don't think I'm going to get the job. I'll be back in Richmond by 11. I'm going to meet with the team at 1. And I'm going, oh, okay, great. Dodge the bullet. At night, before cell phones and everything, I'm sitting at home about 6:30. I get a call from Joe Castiglione. He said, hey, Dick, I just want you to know I'm getting ready to call Jeff and offer him the job. I'm going, oh shit, this is bad on so many levels. I can't believe it. Losing a coach like Jeff Capel, I haven't told the president. This is really bad. So I call the president and I say, Dr. Trani, I kind of need to tell you this. Oklahoma is going to offer Jeff, the head coaching job here in about 2 minutes. And he says, well, did you know about this? And I go, yeah. I said, but here's the situation. And he wasn't very happy, needless to say. He said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to hire Anthony Grant. And he goes, tell me about Anthony Grant. So I tell him something about AG. He said, be in my office tomorrow at 7 o'clock. I go, okay. So we hired AG in about 4 days. So it turned out pretty good. I guess, that year, first year AG was there. We go to the NCAA tournament, beat Duke in the first round. I think Anthony never won less than 26 games in 3 years. So it turned out good, but man, that was probably not the way to hire a coach,
And Doc, you're reminding me of your own president saying yesterday, no surprises.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I understood it, man. You just had to make a decision. Which way? It's a matter of trust. Which way was the trust more important, with you and your coach or you and your president? So, I thought, Jeff and I really need this strong relationship. So I kind of had to go that way, but yeah, it worked out okay. Well, I actually retired pretty quick after that, but it was interesting.
Hey, just to remind everyone, if you have a question for anyone here, please let us know on chat and we'll call on you. I wanted to ask this question, especially from the two of you. Other than the X's and O's pieces of the puzzle for you looking for a head coach, what are the things you're really looking for at each of your schools from a person perspective, from all the other intangibles that go into a head coach? Gerald?
Well, for me, it's energy. I believe that we want our student athletes to play with energy and passion. Our coaches need to reflect that. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. So I do look for energy. I look for people who can communicate, great communicators, because on our campus, our community here in Clarksville has been so involved with the university in every aspect for so long that they got to be able to really feel like that they have a great understanding and a connection with their coaches. So that's why I talk about coaches not being able to sit in those rooms all day long and watch film like they like to do. They got to be able to go to the local place to eat on downtown, or they got to be able to find a church and be willing to do, whatever those things are. Not necessarily a church, I shouldn't say that, but find a place to go and be around the community. I think that is a huge piece here in Clarksville for us. And then a person that understands the overall, and willing to understand the overall university and athletics department goals, what we're trying to do. Because a lot of times you can get a coach and they're so locked in, especially at the mid-major level. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna win, and I'm getting out, and I got to get this job, and that's all they care about. And that's really not the way I like to function or run an athletics department. I want a coach that's willing to go support other sports, that's willing to be around and a part of our campus community as well as our Clarksville community.
Mark?
Yeah, I agree. Very similar. I'm big on high energy. I like very positive people, you know, who look at opportunities, not problems, who want to be part of a solution to something to help us get better. Somebody that's going to, you know, focus on the student athletes and care about them as much off the court as they do on the court. Because I think, you know, we talk to our coaches all the time that coaching's changed. I mean, you can't, in 5-10 years, it's changed a lot. And you could be, I think everyone wants to have accountability, whether you're a student athlete or employee, a person, a brother, whatever. And you can be tough and demanding, but you have to care about them. And you have to come from a place that you're trying to make them a better basketball player, soccer player, better student, prepare them for life, to care about them off the court. And if you don't bring that side of it, it's not going to work, because I think student athletes will see right through that. And then just depending on the position, most recent with men's basketball, you know, that's obviously a leadership position for the sport, but it's a leadership position in this athletic department. It's at least leadership on this campus and in the community. And so somebody who's going to represent us well, somebody's going to participate. You know, Gerald talked about going to other sporting events. In our case, we wanted to be at other university events and other community events, and come to the all-staff meeting and participate. Because if you don't, it's going to be noticed, and it's going to be hard to get things done. And people, our coaches and our staff are paying attention to that. So I think those things off the court are really important. And then, you know, just a simple thing, you know, we all work so much together. We all don't have to be best friends, but somebody that you would like to spend some time with outside of their sport or outside it, I think is important, because I think that type of relationship, look, we're all going to have these ups and downs. And when you're having a down, those are the things, if you're aligned and fit, they're going to help you work through it.
And you bear with me, you reminded me of a story, both of you, that I have to tell. When I was at San Diego State, we played annually in a basketball tournament called the Wooden Classic up in LA. And this was when John Wooden was still alive. And on the Friday night before the games, we had a dinner, and he would always speak, and always allowed time at the end of his speech for questions and answers. So he finished his speech and opened it up, and the first question out of the audience was, Coach, if you had to give, what are the top 3 things, pieces of advice you'd give to anyone with their teams? And he said, oh my gosh, that's really easy. He said, A, they got to know you love them. B, they got to know you love them. C, they got to know you love them. And I've never forgotten that. And so whenever we've done interviews, that's always a question we get to. We don't ask it that way, but we always want to know what their feelings are toward the student athletes. What's the culture? Do they care about those kids off the field and off the court? So again, that was indelibly in my mind to this day. We have a question from Rick Cantor, I think. Rick?
Yep. Appreciate that. When going through the process for a new head coach, how do you evaluate and weigh the difference between going with somebody who would be a first-time head coach coming from an assistant role versus going with somebody who has a lot of head coaching experience? How do you weigh that two and decide whether you go with one to the other?
I can take that one. So I think it depends on your situation. I reference our women's basketball search. It was my 2nd or 3rd year here. Katie Abramson, terrific coach. Every year we were together, she had offers, multiple offers or opportunities. And she had won, I think, 5 straight championships. So her leaving at the time, I felt like it was important that we got somebody that had head coaching experience at some point. Those are big, big shoes to fill. And so that was one of the things that we we hope to find. Now, we were open to someone without it, but in a perfect world, this would be, we'd like a female head coach, we'd like somebody who's been a head coach or is a head coach. And it happened, it worked out. We hired Joanna Magni. I mentioned she's a Boston College. She had a great story. She was an assistant at West Virginia. She was at Maryland with Brenda Freeze when they won a national championship. The year they won the national championship, she was pregnant with her second child. And by the way, I'm not saying anything she hasn't shared publicly. And she didn't tell anybody on the team. Brenda didn't know, the players didn't know. And so after that season, she tells them after they win it, she has the baby. She decides, I cannot be a really good assistant coach and a really good mom. And she got out of coaching. She said, I'm just going to go focus on being a mom. Sat out for 4 years and then gets the head job at Pikeville. For those of you who were on the panel yesterday, Dr. Hurley hired her at Pikeville. He talked about this story. So we hired her. She did a terrific job as a head coach there. Most recently in men's basketball, we had a coach who's been here for 20 years. 5 championships over those 20 years. Really the only face, voice, brand of basketball this place has ever known in our Division I history. I thought to bring in a head coach to follow this person. Obviously, we would be open to it. We talked to a number of them, but they're always that measuring stick. We felt like this freshness, fresh energy, fresh approach, that we would be fine hiring someone who had never been a head coach, as long as all the other things on our list were checked off. And then, you know, we feel like we got that person. So I think it just changes from time to time and what your current situation is. And like Gerald said about your list, you know, you can't just have this static or cookie cutter approach, right? You have to understand the situation you're in at that time and where do you want to go.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think for us here, as we've done them both and evaluated both assistant coaches and head coaches with experience. I think a lot of it depends on your situation and what type of team that you have too. I mean, if you're sitting there and you've got a pretty mature team and that's ready to compete for championships, you may look at it totally different. And if you know you got the cupboard is bare and everybody's starting all over together, and you want to give that coach a chance. I look at our football situation. I made a decision when Will Healy left to go to Charlotte, like 9 months after I got here, if it was that, maybe 6 months after I got here, he left to go to Charlotte. I felt like our program was in a position where we needed a person who sat in that chair and had been a head coach. We kind of turned it around, and I didn't want to risk starting all over again. And we hired Mark Hudspeth, who was very successful, been a head coach for numerous years, and it worked out. He played it well. This year in our basketball search, though, replacing Matt Figure, I felt like we needed, like Mark just said, we need some freshness, some positivity, some energy, that kind of thing. And I felt like we could take a little bit more of a flyer on a coach that may not have been a head coach, but somebody who's had success with it, where they've been, and that they have a level of compassion that we may have lost as a program. And so I felt like we could take that risk there. And so it's really not I prefer this or I prefer that. I think roster, I think situation, the way you're aligned, and the type of TLC and leadership your program needs at the time dictates it. So, for example, and this is not our case here, but if I had a team that had a discipline issue, like a lot of discipline issues, I may lean toward a coach that had experience that I know has shown that they can fix those things or repair those things. If I had a program that just needed a jolt of energy, and you may look more for a high energy assistant coach. It just depends. And I'll say this too, the maturity level of the assistant coach matters. Like, when you talk to an assistant coach, whether this person was just an assistant or this person had some it's just waiting. When you talk to one, Mark can probably get attest to this. When you talk to one of these guys or young ladies and they're like, boy, that's a head coach. Just hadn't had the opportunity. And sometimes those assistants are more mature than some of the head coaches that you've talked to that may be stuck in their ways. So I really don't think there's a cookie cutter way to do it, to say it that way. I just think you got to figure out what's best for you, that program at that time.
And I do think we hear a lot of times, especially when we're helping a client with a search, many times the first word out of the athletic director's mouth is, "Well, I'd love to hire a current head coach." And we always have to remind them that just about every head coach in this country was an assistant coach and made that leap at one point in time, and lots of really, really great head coaches among that group. So we look really hard and probably spend more time researching the assistant coach pool than we do the head coach pool that might be out there, because head coaches are easy to kind of vet. So another question, I know we're getting toward the end, but I'm interested in this. I would think our team is interested in this. Talk about what you look for when you do get face-to-face with a candidate, assuming you're down to a final small group of candidates and you're one-on-one with that candidate. What do you each of you look for in a candidate?
Well, for me, presence is one, how they carry themselves, and what some Mark said early on in one of his previous answers that's when this comes into play for me. Can I see myself having a conversation with this person or being around this person without them being around their ball or their sport? I think that's a huge thing. Like when they get to that point, I very rarely talk the sport. I talk more about them, the individual. I'm trying to learn them, and can I vibe with that person? Can I be around that person? Do you want to be around that person? And so when face to face, that's pretty much what I'm looking for. Because if I get you on campus or I get it narrowed down to 2, I know you can do the job. I know you're a match for my job description. Now the question is whether you're a fit. Your personality is a fit. The way you carry yourself is a fit for our community, for our institution, and for our student athletes. So those are the things I look for when they come to campus.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Pretty much everything Gerald said, that's kind of what I'm looking for. How do you carry yourself? How do you present yourself? Simple things that many of us were taught, like when they say hello to you, did they make good eye contact with you? Did they shake your hand? Did they do those basic elemental things that you're supposed to do when you interact with people in a very genuine way? So for me, and body language is very important, whether it's on a Zoom or in person. Is what is their body language like? It'll tell you a lot. Are they slouching? Are they like looking off? Are they checking their phone when they're like? Believe it or not, as we all know, people will do that in the very, very wrong setting. And so I joke. It's not so much about the hiring process, but with our current coaches, when we talk about uniforms and gear, I said, I wish we could have a rule that based on how you dress and how you present yourself, you're either allowed to pick out your team's uniforms or you're not, because sometimes they sort of go together on that.
Amen.
But all those things, I think all those things are really important. I think another thing too, Jeff, is, I remember Doc saying this, our jobs, and talking about a list, right? You got to have a list. But our job is to recruit the coach to come work with us, right? Not necessarily the other way around. Sure, they need to be going after jobs, but it is important, and it says a lot, is how prepared are they? How much research have they done about your institution? How much research have they done about you? Do they know anything about you and your career and your fit? Because people that want these jobs, there's so many good ones. The people that tend to separate themselves are super prepared, super engaged. It's a job that they want because they feel like it's a very good fit for them. Not just, hey, I'm interviewing for this job. And you could sort that out, I think fairly easily when you're talking to people. So, but everything Gerald says, check.
And Doc, you've done a ton of hires in your career. What do you look for at the end of the day?
Well, I think there's a couple things, Jeff. I think first thing is, authentic. Are they really authentic? Some people, when you interview, you just get a feeling that, they're I mean, for lack of a better term, you know, your BS meter goes off. You know what I mean? That they just are such sales. I mean, they're so selling so much. And you say, are you really authentic? So I really try to, you know, identify, are these people really authentic? Is this guy or this gal really authentic? That's number one. Number two, do they get it? Or do they understand, you know, the big picture? Do they understand what we're trying to do as an athletic program where, you know, our main purpose is to bring value to the institution? Do they get that? And, you know, I think it's getting more and more important every year is, do they get, you know, the big picture? Do they understand how events around the country may impact this program? That like Gerald said, they're just not an X's and O's person, but they're actually the leader. They're somebody that can come in and take you know, aggregate a ton of data, put it together, and then put together a plan. And they have a plan that's very well thought out and very real. You know, some people have a plan, and you know, it's the one that they've written up 3 years ago, but it's not really the plan for your program. So I think those are things that have always really been important to me. And I think there's also, like Mark and Gerald said, that connection. Do you really feel that you're connected with them, that you can really work together, that they really want this to be a team? It's not about them, it's about a team. It's you and them being able to work together, and you can really establish a relationship that's built on trust. So I think those are really the critical things for me. And that last thing may be the most important.
And you just talked about the BS meter. Something we are currently involved in assisting Baylor with the search for a new head track coach. And as yesterday, after our meetings here, we were vetting a particular candidate, and I talked to a very prominent Power 5 AD who had interviewed this candidate and had not hired this candidate, and we had heard some stories. So I called that athletic director, and he said, Jeff, I was ready to hire this person, and brought him to campus. And too much of the BS meter in a half a day's worth of conversation that I changed my mind completely and went with another candidate. And of course, my job is to report that to the Baylor guys. And so they've turned away from a candidate because of that very thing. So the face-to-face stuff is just so critical, I think, in this day and age. And we've suffered through a year and a half of not being able to do that in a very effective way. In fact, we did Big West Conference Commissioner search. We had 12 initial candidates, all with flights into LA last March. And then everything shut down, as we all know. So we canceled all 12 and did all 12 by Zoom, and then took that search from that initial interview process all the way down to the finals, did it entirely by Zoom, and hired Dan Butterly as a result of the Zoom meetings. And you know this, we all learned how to do Zoom as we went. Every day we learned something new about how to do it. So I do think we still suffer. I mean, face-to-face is so much better because of the very things that Mark and Gerald and Doc have talked about. So it is 2:45.
Hey, Jeff, can I just add one quick thing? Would you mind?
Yes, Mark.
Something Gerald said just struck me, and I agree with, and was advice given to me when I was interviewing for an AD job is, be yourself. Be the most best authentic version of yourself, because if you're getting an interview, if you're a finalist, whether you're a basketball coach or going for a deputy AD job or an AD job, the people you're talking to are a search firm. They already think you can do the job. You're qualified for it. And now we're just looking for who's the best fit. Sometimes you are, sometimes you're not. So my advice, I took it and it was helpful. I would just share with you, if you're in those situations or you're in it, just be yourself, the best version of you, because it's about fit.